This video has over 1 million views for a reason, because it actually works. But since I made it, a lot has changed. Some things people recommend still don't work, some cheap fixes works better than ever, and there's still a ton of confusion between soundproofing and sound treatment. So in this updated version, I'm keeping the same $100 goal and the same realistic expectations, but everything is tighter, clear, and based on what actually works in 2026. And I'll also add a few sound tests so you can actually hear for yourself if it works for you. Now let's begin with the biggest return on investment by far: sealing the air gaps in the room. If you only do one thing from this entire video, do this step. Most rooms leak sound like crazy, even newer ones, and it usually happens in places people completely ignore. Around doors, around windows, along baseboards, along trims, around outlets and switches. None of this looks dramatic on camera, but this is where the biggest gains happens for the least money. Here's the simplest way to think about it. If you can feel air, you're losing sound. If you can see light, you're also losing sound. What you're actually doing, you're not soundproofing the wall, you're blocking air paths. What to use is a budget-friendly acoustic sealant. I'll have links in the description below of everything I talk about in this video because it might have changed from a couple of years ago. And then run sealant along that, along baseboards where they meet the wall, the window trim, the door trim, any visible cracks or seams, then seal over it. And why this works so well is most sound coming in or out of a room isn't blasting straight through a wall. It's leaking around it. And the best part, this step improves every other step we're about to do. Step 2, the weakest link in the room. Most interior doors are hollow core, which means they're basically two thin skins with air inside. Sound goes right through them. But the biggest problem usually isn't the door itself, it's the gaps around it. So the first thing you need to do is weather strip the door and add a door sweep. This is the cheapest and highest impact door upgrade. Add weather strip around the frame, install a U-shape or adhesive door sweep. This seals the largest moving air gap in the entire room. What I like about the U-shaped door sweep is that it is temporary. You can slide it in, slide it out when you don't need it, because sometimes the air circulation inside the room, the reason why there's a big gap underneath the door is not only to let sound in, but also to let air in and out of the room. Now you're blocking that. If you don't have proper air return into your room, that could be a problem. What you can do is just put a blanket under the bottom of the door and you'll notice if there's any changes in the room. Or if you really need soundproofing, a U-shaped door sweep where you don't really stick any screws through it works perfect. Also, if you want to leave it there, what I also like is a industrial door sweep where it's metal, you screw it into the bottom of the door and there is a heavy-duty rubber bottom that slides on the floor, and it works quite well, but it is a more permanent fix. Here is a couple of sound tests for the weather strip and the door sweep just to show how it works. But before we begin our little project, we'll take a sound test to see how much noise goes through. All right, let's put some royalty-free music so I don't get copyright claimed. So basically it's between 43 to 48 decibels. Let's see if we can reduce that amount for 20 bucks to reinstall it. Now this is much better. Now that you have the door sweep installed, you just mark where you need to cut it. So all you need to do to cut it to size is just use some scissors. As you can see, I already did this, but I'm just perfecting it now. Put that on the other side and see if there's any improvement. Between 40 and 44. Let's see if we can reduce that even more by one more thing. Less than $10 item. You can get weather strip that is, well, this one I believe was around $10. For $20, if we can get rid of a few decibels. Now, they say that if you reduce the noise by just 3 decibels, you're essentially reducing the amount of energy of the noise in half. Where the biggest difference is noticeable is when you reduce the amount of decibels by 10. It's the equivalent of reducing the amount of noise that your ears can hear by half. We're not gonna get rid of all of the noise, but at least if we can get rid of some of the noise to make it, or some of the noise that goes out of the room in this case, at least it makes a little bit or a significant difference depending on where you stop. So now we'll do another sound test just to see if there is a significant difference. We saw the decibel reading go into the 30s, 39, 38. That's something that we didn't see earlier. So you did see a reduction in noise from now 38, 39 to 42, 43. So that's quite a difference in noise reduction when you seal the bottom door gap and around the door. One thing about the weather strip is that is also what I would consider temporary, because if you open and close the door quite often, it will peel off a lot quicker. But if you want something that is a lot more permanent, if you're using the door, if it's a door leading to a hallway, then you might want something a little bit more permanent, which is a door seal kit. And a seal kit like this, it screws into the door frame, it's more permanent, it works a lot better, and it seals tighter. Here is a sound test of that door seal kit. All right, first we will be taking a decibel reading. All right. Between 47, 48, 50. Now that you've sealed around the door, it's time to add mass to the door. However, with a budget of only $100, it can be a little bit tricky. So you can't really add that much mass onto the door. You can't change the hollow door to a solid door for that type of budget. What you can add over the door that will make a small difference in sound leaving or entering the room are moving blankets, and also you can use a door panel that I found on Amazon. They're only around $25. Here's a sound test of that door panel to see if it's actually worth buying, because I do see a lot of people on Amazon buying them. Some they're happy, some they're not. I did try it. Here's the sound test. We're gonna do our before test. Now we'll find out if this type of door panel actually is good to block a little bit of noise, and well, see if it works. As you saw, it did have a decrease of noise going from this room to the other. The first decibel test without the curtain, it was hovering around 54 decibels. And after, with the curtain, it was hovering around 51 decibels. So as you could see, it decreased between 2 and 3 decibels. Now that the door is sealed, you now have to spend a little bit of money to the window. What you can do to the window that is below $100 is, of course, seal around the window frame with your acoustic caulking that you've already done. And if the weather stripping around the window or where you open and close the window is getting quite weathered, quite not that well at sealing, then it would be time to replace that. Those are not that expensive, and they're a must before you do anything else to the window. Now with $100, you can't really change the window, but you can, if you have a small enough window, you can add a window panel. If you have a big window, these window panels can cost in the hundreds of dollars. However, if you have a small window that a lot of noise is leaking in, then this might be right in your budget. A window insert can make a single pane window type window feel more like a double pane window without actually having to upgrade the window. I was quite surprised at how well this window panel worked. Along with a window panel, you can add something called blackout curtains. Now, Blackout curtains, they are 3 layers. There's an inner and outer layer, and there's a black felt in the middle. Now these are also called sound deadening curtains. Some people call them soundproofing curtains, but they don't soundproof. They deaden a little bit of the noise inside the room and also coming into the room. Don't expect a lot of noise reduction. However, for the cost of $20 to $40, these type of curtains will not only block light, but they'll block a little bit of noise. All right, step 5, walls and ceilings. What actually stops sounds going through walls and ceilings requires structural changes. That means things like adding more drywall, adding mass-loaded layers, decoupling surfaces, resilience channels, or isolation clips if you want to isolate vibrations, because all of that works, but none of it fits into a $100 budget, and pretending it does is how people get disappointed. So we're not rebuilding walls in this video. But what is realistic at this budget? Other than taking out the electrical outlets and sealing all those areas that I talked to earlier, there's not much more that you can do with a $100 budget. But those are the things that you should definitely do whether you have a $100 budget or a $1,000 budget. But make sure to turn off the electrical breaker before going through those electrical outlets and such. And then there's ceilings and floors. Well, ceilings and floors for $100, still not much you can do. Nothing you can really do to the ceiling, to be quite honest, because if you're trying to mask, let's say, voices, TV noise, you have to add mask, which means drywall. With a budget of $100, you can't really add that much drywall onto a ceiling, so we can forget about that one. But what you can do is add stuff onto the floor if you have access to the floor above, which is carpeting. Thick area rugs that you can get for a reasonable price can work quite well at reducing a lot of those vibrational noise coming down. But let's say you want to raise your budget. If you want to raise your budget to $200, watch this video right here. That opens the door to a lot of things that you can do, especially to the wall. What can you do to a wall for $200? Watch that video. You can also join my membership if you want personal one-on-one soundproofing advice. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, assuming you subscribed.